Well, the virus has now killed more than 100 people in China, and new cases have been confirmed around the world.
So you don't want to frighten the American public.
France and South Korea have also got evacuation plans.
But you need to prepare for and assume
strongly warning Americans to avoid all non-essential travel to China.
That this is going to be a real serious problem.
France, Australia, Canada, the US, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, the list goes on.
Health officials are investigating more than 100 possible cases in the US.
Germany, a man has contracted the virus.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
Japan, where a bus driver contracted the virus.
Coronavirus has killed more than 100 people there and infected more than 4,500.
We have to prepare for the worst, always, because if you don't and the worst happens.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
They say Black Lives Matter. You killed your own. Killed your own this time. Just because of barrier. They killed my baby because she crossed the barrier and made a U-turn. You killed a child. She ain't do nothing to nobody.
They didn't give us time to make a U-turn. They started shooting on my car before we could even make a U-turn. Shooting my tires out, like, why?
But Black Lives Matter.
My baby was shot in her bed.
Killing your own.
Nobody there to help
You
me.
killed an 8-year-old child.
Nobody.
She ain't did nothing to now one of y'all. She just wanted to get home to see her cousin. That's all she wanted to do. She just wanted to get home. They say Black Lives Matter.
Welcome to War Room Pandemic Monday, July the 6th, the year of our Lord 2020. The words there of the father of the 8-year-old girl who was fatally shot Saturday near the Wendy's where Rashad Brooks was killed a few weeks ago. Incredibly moving stories, and stories that we're seeing from all around the country at the moment. This is War and Pandemic. Greg Mans, Jack, Maxi, Raheem Kassam here in studio on Capitol Hill, episode 265 of War and Pandemic on the John Fredericks Radio Network on America's Voice. News, Newsmax, and later on subtitled in Mandarin, blown through the firewalls by G News and GTV to reach mainland China. I want to bring in now Steve Cortez, our guest for this segment, and Stephen K. Bannon remotely. Over to you, Mr. Bannon.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's very moving. This has been really an epic weekend, and we want to go through it everywhere from Mount Rushmore. We're going to try to get Jack Posobiec on, who covered it live, and talk about the president's very moving speech, very powerful speech out there, the markers he laid down, both at Mount Rushmore and then back on the South Lawn of the White House on July 4th. But really, I think the key thing was not the rhetoric, but what happened in the streets of America. And this goes back to the defund the police movement. And I think it was very moving. The audio guys you just played to open up this, right? There's a little girl who was gunned down in cold blood, right? It's getting worse and worse in these cities. Nowhere is it worse than in Chicago, and that's where we're honored to have Steve Cortez. You know, Steve is one of the most sophisticated financial analysts around. We normally have Steve on here talking about jobs or talking about the economy, where he's absolutely a brilliant guy. But what's happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks, you know, Steve Cortez called this. He said, hey, look, if we're in this lockdown, we've got this economic carnage. You've got so many young men underemployed or unemployed with no sports and nothing to do. Something's eventually going to happen. And he said, in my city, Chicago, it's going to explode. I got to tell you, the carnage in Chicago continues to build. And I now know the President of the United States is starting to take a hard look at this, not just for resources, but what action has to be taken. Cortez, can you walk us through exactly what's happening in Chicago? Because it looks like a war zone.
You bet. No, you know, unfortunately it is. And by the way, speaking of a war zone, and this is the truth, the United States military sends some of its medics to train in the emergency rooms of Chicago to learn to treat gunshot victims before they are deployed to war zones, before they go to Iraq and Afghanistan. They come to the ERs of Chicago because, unfortunately, this is a domestic war zone, and the medical community here is sadly extremely skilled at handling gunshots because they get so many of them. This weekend, another weekend of carnage in Chicago. 90 people total were shot over our Independence Day weekend, 19 of them killed, including a 7-year-old girl named Natalia Wallace. Her family described her as shy and good at math. I wish that this were an outlier, Steve, but it isn't. Children are dying with regularity now in our city. A 1-year-old last weekend, Sincere Gaston, was killed. A 10-year-old, Lena Nunez. I could unfortunately continue to go on. I think, by the way, though, it's important to say their names because, of course, these aren't just statistics. These are precious American children who are being slaughtered in random acts of violence in our cities, particularly in the city of Chicago. And at the same time, our failed leadership of this city, Mayor Lightfoot, what does she do in response? She casts aspersions at the president. She uses profanity, as a matter of fact, to attack the president of the United States, and she tries to divert attention away from what has become, in many ways, a third world city. And believe me, I don't say this with any pride, quite the opposite. I have raised a family in the city of Chicago. I've lived here my entire life, and we have become, sadly, a failed, broken third world city in the middle of the United States of America. And I think, unfortunately, we can't solve this ourselves, certainly not the leadership of this city. We do need help. We need the leadership of President Trump, and we need some specific policy proposals, which I'm happy to get into, that I think can help Chicago from the federal level.
Yeah, but right before we get in that, Raheem and Jack and Greg, guys in the war room, Chicago is absolutely the epicenter and the worst. But this is spread throughout the country. I mean, New York City is also, I think it's 140% increase in gunshot victims. It seems like this is directly tied to the defund the police movement. But what other cities are we seeing, and particularly New York? How bad is it there, Raheem?
Well, Steve, shootings in New York City are up 205%. Seattle has had a 525% spike in crime.
Do we have? Has Heather McDonald I know she's at City Journal. Has she come out with some new analysis of what's going on?
Well, it's a very interesting article, and I've just tweeted it out, and we'll share it from the War Room accounts as well, and in our newsletter today. It's called Breakdown, this article in the City Journal. And Heather McDonald talks about the Ferguson effect, that by early 2015, after the Michael Brown shooting in August 2014, by 2015, the resulting spike in shootings and homicides had led to an additional 2,000 black homicide victims, and that took place across 2015 and 16 compared to the numbers of the years before. And Heather McDonald is calling this the Ferguson Effect 2.0, or the Minneapolis Effect. And she goes through the numbers in this article, which are quite staggering. She mentioned Chicago, 18 people killed and 47 wounded in drive and walk-by shootings last weekend. The previous weekend before that in Chicago, 104 people shot, 15 fatally. New York's homicide rate at a 5-time high. The number of shooting victims up over 42% through June the 21st compared with the same period in 2019. Obviously, that number, as you just said, has increased since. And Milwaukee's homicides increased 132%. The Milwaukee police inspector saying, in 25 years, I've never seen it like this, Steve.
So, Steve Cortez, before we get into solutions, what is causing this? Is this the defund the police? Is this the police backing off? I mean, what's the situation here? Why all of a sudden have American cities exploded? Is it what you're saying about the jobs and about the pandemic, the CCP pandemic? What's your analysis of why you have this explosion of anarchy and violence in America's, and really the heart of America's greatest cities?
Right. No, Steve, I believe it's exactly that. It's a confluence of two factors. One is the CCP virus, what it has done to our country. It infected the world, it crashed the global economy, and it put thousands and millions of young American men in a state of idleness. And we know that young men with nothing to do, without school and work and sports and social life, normal social life, we know that can be a powder keg, particularly once it gets warm. And that has happened in Chicago. It's happened in a lot of cities in this country. But secondly, absolutely, it's the defund the police movement. It's not even just the defunding. I mean, that's bad enough. But it's also the demoralizing of the police. They know that the political leadership does not have their backs in places like Chicago. And because of that, they're not being preemptive. They're not being proactive. They're not trying to prevent the crime before it happens. And frankly, I don't blame them. They have pulled back, and they are being reactive and showing up after the carnage has already ensued, unfortunately. And I think the reality, Steve, here, by the way, in cities like Chicago, is that black lives don't matter. When it comes to these Democratic politicians, this is the harsh truth. Black votes matter a lot to them. But black lives don't matter, because if they did, we would see aggressive and very different, very forceful policy responses in cities that are in carnage, like my hometown of Chicago.
Listen, I got to go. Before we talk about solutions with President Trump, I got to get in here for a second and just ask something basic. Chicago is President Obama's adopted hometown. It is the hometown of Michelle Obama. It's his chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, was mayor there for a couple of terms. This just didn't happen on the current mayor's watch. This has been building for a number of years. What is this? You talk about Joe Biden and the Democrats, and you talk about these big city mayors. This rot starts from the top down. I mean, how can President Obama and Michelle Obama and Rahm Emanuel sit there and see what's happening to a great city like Chicago, and particularly in places like the south side of Chicago, and among African Americans, the black community? How can they just sit on the sidelines and let this happen? This is, I think, what people find stunning.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Steve. The Democratic Party has had full control of the city of Chicago for nearly a century. And I find it almost laughable. I mean, of course, there's nothing funny about the situation, but it's almost laughable, by the way, when I'll hear people like Mayor Lightfoot here describe systemic racism, for example. When it comes to the, quote, system of Chicago, the system has been completely controlled by leftist Democrats, as I mentioned, for nearly a century. And when we look at the present leadership, the mayor, the head of schools, the chief of police, the county board president, the district attorney, state's attorney, we call it here, all of them black, all of them liberal Democrats. So for them to claim that there's systemic racism is an indictment of themselves, because they are, in fact, the system when it comes to Chicago, and unfortunately a completely failed system.
Look, if you look at what Heather McDonald just said, Greg Manns, I don't know if we have teed up, I think it was Chad Wolf this morning. Do we have ready to go his clip saying about what President Trump is trying to do here about resources?
Yeah, we can go to the Chad Wolf clip if the Denver team of America's Voice have that.
And then I want Cortez to respond to that.
Let's roll it. I can see the wrong clip up there. Let's get the Chad Wolf clip.
Okay, don't worry about it. So Steve,
we got it, Steve. We'll roll it.
Can't we say yes? We'll take federal dollars. We'll take your help, Mr. Trump. We'll work together. We'll clean up these cities.
Right. This is about law and order, and the president's been very clear. We're here to help them. I think any city that is having increases in violence, is burning, is having the rioting and looting, it's by choice at this point. Those local elected officials are making a choice to keep their cities very unsafe and dangerous. The president's been very clear. We're here to support. We're here to provide resources, and we'll do that at their request.
Sure. And, Mr. Secretary, for the people who live in these communities that are seeing so much gun violence.
Let's kill that. Okay. It's back to Steve and Steve Cortez to react.
Yeah, Cortez, here's the thing, is that the president, it sounds like the president's there for backup and to provide resources, as Secretary Wolf over at DHS said, but it doesn't look like he's going to take action. I think today there was some tweeting, or he's saying something, hey, if they don't act, I will. Where are we thinking in this action? I know President Trump's been available, and I think Wolf lays it out. Any city that's having this carnage right now is by choice of the local officials. The president said, hey, we're here to assist in every level. What's your response?
Well, and listen, I would say, respectfully to the president, as a Chicago resident, don't wait for these city leaders to ask for help, because they won't, because they're too proud and they're too arrogant. These are American citizens who are suffering. They're not just Chicagoans, they're Americans, and in other cities. So I would encourage the president to do a few things. Number one, I think federal charges should be brought against many dangerous people in the city. The reason I say that, in general, I don't like over-federalizing crimes in the country. Most crimes should be prosecuted at the local and state level. However, we have a state's attorney named Kim Foxx here in Chicago, the same woman who let Jussie Smollett off the hook the first time around. She is literally not charging people who were violent during the riots unless she says she needs video evidence. So unless she has video evidence during the riots of, and I mean serious crimes, things like resisting arrest, aggravated battery of police officers, mob action, people charged with serious violence are being let go unless they have video evidence to back up the charges.
We have 30 seconds.
So given that, I think we need federal charges for a lot of these people. Secondly, defund the police.
Hang on, Steve, can we keep you over for a second? We got to take a short commercial break.
You bet.
Want to keep Steve Cortez over. #WarOnPandemic. Raheem, take us out, and we'll get Cortez back in.
We'll be back with Steve Cortez and the policy solutions. Stick with us. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Just like you, I had problems sleeping. I tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. 15 years ago, I invented MyPillow. It took me 2 years to develop because I wanted to have everything you would ever want in a pillow. I made sure that you could adjust my patented fill so you could have the exact support you need as an individual regardless of your sleep position. I also wanted a pillow that would last, so I made MyPillow machine washable and dryable. I back MyPillow with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Not only that, I do all my own manufacturing in my home state of Minnesota.
I really like the fact that it was made in the USA. I think that USA products are a better quality product. I've tried a lot of other pillows and nothing's worked like MyPillow.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now to give you deep discounts, not just on my pillows, but also my mattress toppers, sheets, and so much more. For example, you can get body pillows regularly $89.99, now only $29.99, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
I used to think that sheets were just sheets. I got the Giza Dream sheets. They are the most comfortable sheets I've ever had.
The Go Anywhere pillow is so easy to just roll up and take anywhere I want to go.
Go Anywhere pillow is really comfortable, so that's what I really like. It's nice and supportive, and it's nice and small.
The MyPillow topper, for the first time, has enabled me to have a cool night's sleep. I'm able to go to bed and just get rest.
That's 3 inches of wonderful that's in the MyPillow mattress topper. It's just like a firm cloud.
MyPillow helps me get a good night's sleep so I can do my job in the morning.
Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts, not just on my pillows, but so much more. For example, you get body pillows regularly $89.99, now only $29.99, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
I sent your new prescription to the pharmacy.
Any idea how much it will cost?
You have a choice. Insurance or GoodRx?
I have insurance.
Insurance is not what it used to be. People struggle to get their prescriptions covered, and prices keep rising. I recommend GoodRx. You get free coupons to save on your prescriptions. Compare prices to find the best discounts.
GoodRx. Smart.
Stop paying too much for your prescriptions. Download the free app today.
My son needs this drug. I hope it doesn't cost too much. I hope my insurance pays for it. Can you tell me how much this will be?
67.
Sorry.
Wait, have you heard about GoodRx? GoodRx finds free coupons to help you save up to 80% on your prescriptions.
Wow. I had no idea.
GoodRx. Stop paying too much for your prescriptions.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room, Monday, July 6th. This is Raheem Kassam here in the War Room with Jack Maxey and Greg Manns. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
It's turbulent from the streets in Hong Kong to the streets in Chicago. If you're an entrepreneur, you know you're going to lead us through this economic carnage, these very difficult times, these turbulent times. You need, as an entrepreneur, NetSuite by Oracle. Please go to netsuite.com/Bannon, B-A-N-N-O-N, to get the 7 action steps you should be taking as an entrepreneur. netsuite.com/Bannon, B-A-N-N-O-N. Go there today. Raheem, can you reset us?
Yeah, I think, Steve, this is the first time, I want to play this clip, the first time that the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, has been in this studio, in the War Room, was so impactful during the impeachment saga. It's the first time I think he's given this sort of an interview on Fox and Friends. We want to take a listen to what he said this morning about what we're talking about right now. Let's go to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows.
Not the response, and it's certainly we see the results this morning from the weekend of violence that really the president is not only standing ready, but he has been ready. About 8 days ago, he instructed a number of federal support teams to make sure that across the country that they stand ready, not just in those cities, but in Seattle, in Portland, St. Louis, other areas where literally we've got DOJ and Federal Protective Services there standing ready. So it's time that we make sure that our cities are safe, and if the local police need help, we'll stand ready and be there for them. And the president has been very clear about that.
But Mark, you have to be invited, right?
Well, certainly there are some times when you have to be invited, but other than that, this president is going to take action and make sure that all life is protected. And when we look at the Constitution, we have a constitutional duty to make sure that those cities are safe. And far too often we see liberal mayors and liberal leaders of these cities looking the other way while they want to throw a whole lot of insults towards Washington.
Steve?
Yeah, Jack, is what the president just come out and have a back up to Wolf and to Meadows?
Well, the president came out just now and quoted Wolf, but Meadows is perfectly responding to what the president tweeted last night, in which he said the federal government is ready, willing, and able to act if asked. And then just a few minutes ago, he reiterated what Wolf had said, and he said, he quoted Wolf, he said, "This is no longer about peaceful protesting. This is about angry, violent, criminal mobs taking over certain Democrat-run cities. It is a lack of political leadership in those cities." Chad Wolf, tweeted by the president just a few minutes ago.
So Steve Cortez, laying all this out, and also tell us, what is it different? Mark Meadows has got a real, I think the buried lead there is, hey, we're waiting to be asked, but if we're not going to ask, we've got Federal Protective Services, we have other things. What do you make of all this?
Right. Well, and I think, and I hope what he's projecting there is the message that if you don't take care of this, we will. Because, again, first and foremost, these are American citizens. And if they happen to live in cities that are ruled by corrupt and incapable Democrats, they still need to be protected as American citizens. So, what I'm proposing is a three-point plan of action here. Number one is federal charges for a lot of these criminals because they are escaping prosecution because of highly inept and or corrupt prosecutors, people like Kim Foxx, who's the state's attorney here in Cook County in Chicago, Illinois. She is literally not charging people who violently attacked police. They are choosing to not prosecute. We can bring federal charges for a lot of these people to show the seriousness of the situation. Number two, I think we need to declaw the defund police movement. How do we do that? Well, the federal government has a lot of power over cities, largely through the purse. We can withhold funds. We can defund cities that want to defund the police. The federal government has enormous leverage over the states and cities via its grants and its funding. And I think we need to back the police both in rhetoric and in substance. We need to become a movement. We are a movement, not become. Let's reiterate that we are a movement that backs law enforcement 100%. And then thirdly, and this is bigger picture, this won't necessarily solve things today, but bigger picture, let's really focus on the message and the theme of jobs, not mobs. This is critical for our country, and I believe it's also the winning message for November for this election. We want to focus on rebuilding the American economy. We've got fantastic economic news out over the last week. That needs to be the focus, the great American comeback out of the doldrums of the CCP virus. Let's focus on jobs, not mobs, and we will not allow mayhem to persist in our cities. And this mayhem, by the way, has been largely encouraged and protected by not just Democratic politicians, but also by their allies in mainstream media. So we need to call it out for what it is. The president has been wonderful in recent days about his clarity, in his reaffirmation of American principles. This is crucial. We need to be just as clear in our denunciation of the mayhem and violence that is all too prevalent in our city. So I believe that if we bring federal charges, if we declaw the defund police movement, and if we focus on jobs, not mobs, that is the formula to resurrect calm and prosperity in the inner cities of America.
job safety and this taking on the CCP. Steve, how do people get more access to you? I know, talk about the show and about your Twitter feed. How do people get more to get to know Steve Cortes and hear more of your thoughts?
Yes, please. I'm at Cortez Steve on Twitter, Cortez with an S. I also have the afternoon drive show in Chicago on AM 560, but you can stream it anywhere, 5 to 7 p.m. Central Time, 560theanswer.com. Today, I'm going to be very focused. I'm having a policeman on. I'm going to be talking exactly about these issues of street carnage in Chicago, so please look me up.
Steve, thank you very much. Fantastic segment.
Thank you.
Raheem, do we have, is Jack with us?
Yeah, we have Jack Posobiec, One American News' Jack Posobiec, joining us on the line now. Jack, welcome to the show. Steve, I don't know where you want to jump in with Jack on this. Over to you.
Before we get to Mount Rushmore, Raheem, I want to get Jack. There's also a number of these Chaz's pop-ups. The one in Seattle is being taken down. There's increasing violence there. The one in Atlanta. I want before we get to the Mount Rushmore part of it, that he was out there live, was on the show on Friday. I really want to hear from him, his take on this out-of-control violence and what he thinks is being done about it.
Well, Steve, that's right. And probably the biggest difference that we saw between the Seattle Chaz, which I spent 3 days and 3 nights in, and some of these other autonomous zones that are being set up, is that in Seattle, you actually saw the abandonment of a police force, a police station, a precinct there in the East District was ordered to be abandoned by Mayor Jenny Durkan of Seattle. Well, we haven't seen that same type of flashpoint of an abandonment of the actual police presence in any of these areas in terms of the precinct itself, which that created a physical location and a hub for people to congregate around and then barricades to be set up. The difference in these other autonomous zones, or so-called autonomous zones, is that they do still have somewhat of a police presence, and you haven't seen the official abandonment or stand-down orders just yet. That being said, a lot of them are being allowed to continue. A lot of them are being allowed to, they're congregating. They hold a lot of people there. And then, of course, in Atlanta over the weekend, an 8-year-old girl was actually shot and killed at one of these in what amounted to almost a drive-by.
Guys, Raheem and Jack and Greg, did the mayor of Atlanta throw down? Did she say, I've had enough of this and that this Chaz is going to go? Where do we stand in Atlanta after this little 8-year-old girl was gunned down?
Well, go ahead. Jack.
Yeah, well, the mayor of Atlanta did come out. She said, enough is enough. We have to stop the violence. And what's interesting is this mayor is reputed to potentially be on Joe Biden's short list. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the vice president has some harsh words to come out and say about this as well. But I do applaud her. A little late, but better late than never. It sounds like she's starting to pull out the hammer.
Well, I mean, you say applaud, and Steve, I wanted to take on this, but I mean, this is somebody who has enabled this problem, who has provided cover, who has provided succor, who has provided excuses for these things. Applause. The applause might come, but the applause is bloodied, right?
Oh yeah, she's behind the 8 ball, but at least hopefully some of her moral courage will start to shed across the country.
Raheem, that's a great tee up. I want to go back to Jack, to Raheem's point. Jack, you were out there. Most American people, because the mainstream media is treated like a street fair. Describe the filth, describe the anarchy. If this is what you want American cities to look like, from Seattle to Atlanta to Chicago, trust me, these anarchists and these radicals are prepared to do it. What was Seattle like? What was it like, and how difficult has it been for police to go back in there and start to take it back over and clean it up?
Well, Steve, as you mentioned, the filth was actually quite palpable. That was really the first thing that I noticed as I walked in through the north end of Cal Anderson Park into where the Chaz zone had been set up. Trash was everywhere. It wasn't being picked up. They had tried sort of to use trash cans at one point, but those were overflowing. Jenny Durkan had brought in, the mayor had asked for porta potties, so outhouses, to be set up around the outskirts of this thing, but those were overflowing, and actually sanitation services weren't able to get in to pick up the trash or to unload the into septic trucks or anything. So you had a situation where it was quite literally overflowing with human filth, trash, garbage throughout the entire area. At the same time, during the day, there was largely a lot of peaceful people, some demonstrations, day trippers coming by, tourists, that type of thing. But if you were a dissenter, if you were someone who disagreed with their message, if you came in, I saw a Christian street preacher who was choked out, literally put in a chokehold on the ground and drug out by his arms. People who came in with the American flag were chased off. One flag was torn down. And then at nighttime, Steve, when the day trippers and tourists left, that's when the gangs moved in. That's when the violence broke out.
Jack, we've got to go to a break here. Steve, we've got 30 seconds to go.
No, hashtag war on pandemic, and in the live feed, Raheem, tell people how they can get this. We want to hear your voices, this anarchy and chaos in the United States. President Trump looks like he's finally going to take some action here. We're going to talk about the rhetoric next, these powerful speeches of Mount Rushmore and on the South Lawn on July 4th next.
Thanks to Jack Posobiec, Greg Mance, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon will return with more War Room Pandemic in just a second.
Brett Favre, legendary quarterback. Jerry Rice, legendary wide receiver.
You ready for your weekly meeting?
Yeah, we're ready.
Let's do this.
Let's stack the deck.
When legends play, they wear Copperfit Advanced Back Pro. Copperfit's best-selling compression back support just got better with new double-band adjustable supports for customizable compression when you need it most.
Since I put this on, I feel so much better. The core is the most important thing. To know that I'm stabilized here. Whatever I'm doing, I can give it 100%.
4 built-in stabilizing supports designed to improve posture and help reduce lower back stress and strain.
You have back pain, and it's affecting your everyday life. You do something.
If you can find something to help you get back out and be active like Copperfit, go for it.
Absolutely.
Do not give up. A high-performance compression fabric infused with the powerful properties of copper, 360-degree flexible mobility, and lightweight, durable construction.
Nothing more painful than having back pains. If you're aching, if you feel like you can't work out anymore, you can. And that's with Copperfit.
Yeah. It's for all of us who still want to be active, still want to compete.
Way to go. That's what I'm talking about. Man, this really does feel good. It feels to me like the fountain of youth.
Copperfit's best-selling back support just got bigger, badder, and better. Or call 1-800-944-5851. Or on the web at advancedbackpro.com. Get yours now for only $19.99.
This does feel good.
That's what I've been saying.
You think it was fair?
It was fun.
Play for the love of the game.
Copperfit, live limitless.
Have you or a loved one taken Zantac or another heartburn medication and developed cancer? You may be entitled to compensation. The FDA just announced that it is requesting manufacturers withdraw from the market all prescription and over-the-counter ranitidine heartburn medications, commonly known by the brand name Zantac. This is the latest step in an ongoing investigation of a contaminant known as NDMA in ranitidine heartburn medications. NDMA is a chemical that the FDA and World Health Organization both classify as cancer-causing. Now, prior to this announcement, CVS and Walgreens pulled Zantac from their shelves, citing the link between Zantac, NDMA, and cancer. If you or a loved one have taken Zantac or another heartburn medication and developed cancer, how do you fight for the compensation you deserve? You choose the right legal team that has the experience, support staff, and resources to seek the most compensation for your injuries. Call for more information and a free case review.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, the president's speech at Mount Rushmore this past week caused some incredible consternation from the media. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, a lot of these news outlets calling the speech dark and divisive. I think they must be listening to a completely different speech by a completely different person in a completely different universe, but we'll get into the discussion on that. You're in the War Room with Greg Mance, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, from the foot of Mount Rushmore to the foot of the Himalayas, where the border dispute is now between India and China, War Room Pandemic, we pride ourselves in covering it all. So you know the world's full of turbulence. If you're an entrepreneur, what you need to do is mitigate the risk that's associated with that turbulence. The way to do it is NetSuite by Oracle. netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon. Get the 7 action steps you need to focus on as an entrepreneur. Remember, Oracle's the #1 platform on the cloud. NetSuite's the #1 platform of software for entrepreneurs. Over 20,000 companies. Your business from $1 million in revenue to $100 million, you need NetSuite by Oracle. Raheem, back to you and Jack Posobiec.
Yeah, I want to start with this clip from the president from Mount Rushmore. Let's hear what the president had to say.
In our schools, our newsrooms, even our corporate boardrooms, there is a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. If you do not speak its language, perform its rituals, recite its mantras, and follow its commandments, then you will be censored, banished, blacklisted, persecuted, and punished. It's not going to happen to us. Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution. In so doing, they would destroy the very civilization that rescued billions from poverty, disease, violence, and hunger, and that lifted humanity to new heights of achievement, discovery, and progress.
Jack Posobiec, you were there. Give us your impressions and reflections on what the president said there, because those are big words and those are fighting words.
Yeah, Raheem, as I was standing there, sort of from the media riser, looking down, actually, and seeing the president say that, I had heard wind that he was going to address some of what was going on with the statues, but I didn't know that he was going to go all in. And for folks that have been longtime listeners of War Room, for folks that have been following Jack Posobiec, you have heard all of these words before. You have heard all of these terms. This has been the great theme of our work over the past year and a half now. And really to hear the President of the United States at Mount Rushmore on Independence Day, delivering that address and realizing that things have gotten to that level. I think this was a true line in the sand moment for President of the United States. I think it was a line in the sand moment, not just for Donald Trump versus Joe Biden in the 2020 election, but a real line in the sand for our country and a turning point. He's presenting us as a turning point of, do we want to continue the great American experiment, or do we want to literally topple it and replace it with something else? And I think that calling it out as a cultural revolution, he didn't mention China in that speech. He did mention China in a speech the next day at the South Lawn. So you could really see the thematic linkage between what happened in China in the 1960s, what's happening in America now, what China's doing now. The real thematic connection is all going on. And right here on War Room, I think you guys have been doing such a great job of putting that all together.
Yeah, let me just jump in here for a second, Raheem. I want to back up what Jack said, is that I thought this was very powerful and really an inflection point, I think, not just of Trump's presidency, but to put in high relief what this is all about. When you say cultural revolution, that goes right back to the Red Guard in the 1960s. But the way he juxtaposed it to the American Revolution goes all the way back to the French Revolution, to the two sources, right? Same time period, actually allies two different revolutions, right? One about liberty, the other about tearing down an entire culture. The four olds, remember, old culture, old customs, old habits, and old thoughts. That's what this revolution, the French Revolution, right through the Bolsheviks, to the Cultural Revolution. And Donald Trump said this, the Cultural Revolution. And that's what this is about. This is about that gap. And that, to me, is in a fourth turning, I keep saying, America is going to be one thing or the other on the other side of this. It's either going to be the country we were bequeathed, obviously, always with changes and making ourselves better in the great struggle, as we're all imperfect, right? Or it's going to be something radically different. And you're seeing this now in high relief. It's the reason we started the show on the bloody streets of Chicago with Steve Cortez. You can see what the alternative is. It's not hidden. Remember, this is no conspiracy. It's all up there in plain sight. And Jack, I think it was very perceptive of you to sit there and say that's not just the heart of the speech. That's really the heart of what this struggle is. Put in high relief at the foot of Mount Rushmore, with those magnificent icons right in back of you. It must have been a very powerful moment for you.
Yeah, it's actually my first time to Mount Rushmore myself, and I was struck reading some of the quotations of the designer and creator of Mount Rushmore, where I had always sort of been told Mount Rushmore was designed as it's a tourist attraction, bring people out to South Dakota. But when you read the inscriptions that were left by the designer, he said, I want something to be an eternal marker of American civilization, so that 10,000 years from now, people will see this literally carved in stone, our greatest heroes and leaders. They will know who we were. They will know what we did here for all time. And I think that was something that the president evoked when he said this monument, he sort of gestured behind him and above him to the statues of the four forefathers. He said this monument will never be desecrated and it will stand forever.
Raheem and Jack, I want to go back to you guys in the war room. Raheem, particularly, you've covered this in a great amount of detail at National Pulse of what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the capitals of Europe, and particularly what's happening in London. I mean, how did that resonate with you when you heard President Trump talk about and actually draw the absolute distinction between the Cultural Revolution that's going on and the American Revolution?
Well, look, I mean, I'm probably not going to find any people on my side when I say this, but Jack, you know what I tweeted while this president was speaking from Mount Rushmore is to say that, and actually goes back to what you were just saying there, Steve, is that the French Revolution and the American Revolution, they may have had things that set them quite apart, but they also had things that set them in common. And there is this one thing, and I mentioned it in my book of 2 years ago, Enoch was right, that is still missing from, I think, the idea of bringing this all back to how we understand civilizations to operate, and that thing is deference. If you don't have anything that the average person can look up to, can defer to, and in our case, of course, it was and still is the monarchy, the crown, even though we've kind of abandoned what that stands for and how it fully operates. But if you get back to that, which is why I'd never call myself a Republican in an American sense, or definitely not in a French sense. But if you get back to that, if you read Burke on revolutions in France, and you read the people that have interpreted that since, there's still this one missing element from that thing that Trump laid it out. He was sort of 90 to 95% there as far as I saw it, but there was still this one thing missing, which is the question I have for all of you guys, and maybe I'll pose it to Jack Maxey, our resident fire-breathing patriot here in the studio, is what is the thing America unites around?
I think what America unites around is this promise that people have the opportunity to make their lives better here. And it doesn't matter about your race, it doesn't matter about your gender, it doesn't matter about where you came from. This is still the land of opportunity, whether people want to say it is or isn't. And one of the reasons we know that is the entire world wants to come here. And for example, if we're talking about disparities based on race, Nigerian immigrants in the United States are more successful than native-born whites in the United States. So this idea that America holds people back is just not the truth. And I think that our audience should remember one thing. As we're trying to erase history, we have to remember that this is not a perfect country. We were started with this magnificent document, the Declaration of Independence, and I think we all know that document did not live up to its words for the first 100 years of our country. But the beautiful thing about this country is that we can change and we can become more positive as time goes on. There are lessons to be learned, but the only way that we can improve ourselves and that we can learn from the lessons of the past is if that we continue to study the past, if we continue to understand it, if we continue to see these monuments around, because they create dialogue, they create conversation, they create education. And we don't look back at the past as some perfection. We look at the past as history, as part of our story. No family is perfect, no country is perfect, But as a family and as a country, we're as close to perfect as any family or any country has ever been.
Steve, I want to get you and Jack on Posobiec on this, because, you know, the deference idea was that, you know, you had the link between the population and the crown, and then the crown and God. And it's that I think we're missing. It's the godliness, it's the faith that didn't scream out at me through that speech.
Well, I wanted, maybe one of the things was talking about the destruction of the four olds. I'd like to hear Posobiec on this, but this is what the French Revolution, the Bolsheviks, and Mao all tried to do. What they tried to do is focus on two things. Number one, destroy any concept of God, destroy any kind of concept of some sort of spirituality that was not directly related to the state. The other was destroy the family. Come in and crush the family. That's the two. That's why they said the four olds. You know, old culture, old customs, old thoughts, and old habits. This is what they wanted to get rid of in destruction. That's the same thing you see. The underlying, not the protest and the peaceful protest about Mr. Floyd and what happened in his murder up in Minneapolis, and other things about problems with certain police officers, the training of them. Is there some sort of racism still in these police departments? But this whole concept of systemic racism, and actually below BLM, which is quite, you know, obviously by its leaders, they profess to be cultural Marxists. And obviously Antifa is full Marxist, just not cultural Marxist. So, Jack, I think on Saturday, the president even was a little tougher and a little harder on the lawn of the White House and calling this out and saying what he was going to do. And I'd like to know, you heard both the speech at the White House and Mount Rushmore. I'd like you to kind of compare them.
Jack, 70 seconds.
Well, I think really what it was is that the speech at the White House, he talked more about what's going on right now today in our world. He also harkened back, of course, in both speeches to our history, to our culture, to the heroes of the past that have made us what we are today, what Maxie was just talking about. But also he talked specifically about the neo-Marxists and anarchists of today. He also talked about China. He mentioned this at the White House on the South Lawn there on July 4th, and specifically called them out by name as a neo-Marxist movement that is seeking to overthrow our country. And to answer Raheem's question, I think you can see from what these anarchist groups target as the things that they're trying to overthrow. So not only do they target law enforcement, not only do they target government, but they also target our churches. They target Catholic statues. We've seen that in Junipero Serra in California. We've also seen in St. Louis, there's Catholics that are now rallying to defend the statue of St. Louis there, King Louis. They're praying the rosary every single day, marching around this thing, peacefully processing. So these attacks on religion itself, because they knew, and even as Alexis de Tocqueville quoted many years ago, that religion was the core of American society upon which everything else was built. That was the cornerstone.
Jack Posobiec, at Jack Posobiec on Twitter, on Parler, at One American News. We've got to bounce to another break. Be back in just a moment with Stephen K. Bannon, Greg Menz, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here in the War Room. Don't go anywhere.
The hottest new razor is taking the men's grooming world by storm. And if you don't have it, you need it. Micro Touch Solo, the hyper-advanced full-body razor that trims, shapes, edges, and even shaves with micro precision. And it's totally safe to the touch. Go solo for full body control with one tool. No nicks, bumps, or ingrown hairs. Edge beards and goatees with one touch. Clean your neck, barber shop perfect. And check this out. Snap on the guide to tame growth and perfectly shape your full beard. And keep new growth stubble trimmed exactly to your style. And look, the Solo Full Body Groomer trims precisely the length of hair you want. Snap off the guide and remove unwanted hair anywhere in seconds. What makes Solo different than your ordinary razor? Dual-sided German stainless steel blade. Shave up or down at 200 microstrokes per second. The Ultra Flex pivoting head contours perfectly to you for precise results. 3 custom grooming guides for control of exact length and shape. And a built-in LED light so you never miss a spot. Solo is so precise, you need no creams, no soaps, and no water. Ditch the old man clippers and toss the scissors. You've got to go solo. Call 1-800-709-9777 or go online at microtouchsolo.com and get yours now for only $19.99. Complete with German stainless steel blade, pivoting head, built-in spotlight, and 3 custom grooming guides. Everything you see here for just $19.99. The all-new MicroTouch Solo Full Body Groomer. The one tool that does it all.
America's Voice News brings you real news and real opinion in a real world. If you care about this country, then you can help by sharing America's Voice with your friends and family. We're here to bring you the truth with no agendas. America is one of the greatest countries of all time. We need a great leader to keep us on track and safe. If you support this president, then help us by being a beacon of hope and standing up for this great nation. Join us as we fight to bring you the truth in a crazy world. Search America's Voice News on all apps, Roku, Pluto TV, and Dish Network Channel 219. Please help by downloading America's Voice News to your phone, on your smart TV. Search America's Voice on all your internet-connected devices. Then share the truth with your friends and family. America's Voice News, the real news network. Join the America's Voice revolution and consider yourself an American patriot.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. It's Raheem Kassam here in for Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey to my right, Greg Manns further to my right. And Greg, we've got some breaking news that we'll get to in the next hour as well. You can explain this latest Supreme Court thing for us. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, we're living in turbulent times. You see this every day on War Room Pandemic from 10 to noon, also replayed later at night. But remember, in these turbulent times, you need to look at a whole different range of alternatives for your investments, not just stocks and bonds, but it's now time you got to look at precious metals. If you want to consider precious metals, the place to go is Birch Gold. Go to birchgold.com today/Bannon, Bannon. They have a 20-page report for you to read and analyze. They're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to make sure you understand the concept of precious metals and why it's so important for you to have it in your portfolio. Remember, they have a 401k program. They have the ability for you to actually own and possess gold. So go to birchgold.com/Bannon, Bannon, the #1 name in gold you can get right now and see this 20-page report. Raheem, we kept Jack Posobiec on, correct?
Yes, yeah, we have Jack.
Jack, let's talk about Hong Kong for a second. Give us the latest breaking developments out of there, particularly the hammers they've sent in by the PLA and state security to make sure they're totally cracking down on the free people of Hong Kong.
Well, Steve, one of the last times that I was in the studio there for War Room, I broke down how essentially what Hong Kong has done. We talk about this as a new national security law. What China has done, when you sort of translate out their CCP language, and I don't mean the Mandarin, but I mean the words. This isn't a national security law. What they've done is they've enacted a new secret police force that is only ordered and directed directly to Beijing and actually to the Politburo, Xi Jinping himself. So this new secret police in Hong Kong that they've set up, which is specifically targeting the protesters and anybody who might be providing aid to them and support to them, people have said, is this thing going to have teeth or not? What's it going to be like? Well, they've sent a massive message to the people of Hong Kong and to the world because they just appointed the head of their new Hong Kong secret police as Zheng Yanxiong. Zheng Yanxiong is a guy who's known for his crackdown on the villages, on the provinces, out when they had riots that were going on, when the workers would be rioting and protesting against local officials. This was the guy that cracked those down. He has a decade of history cracking down on the workers and the farmers out in the provinces of China, mainland China, so they know that this is the hammer to bring into Hong Kong. This elevation of him to the head of the secret police of Hong Kong, and the fact that they're all also now bringing in Chinese intelligence officials, Chinese internal security officials to head this thing. It shows you exactly where they're going to go with this. It shows you that the rule of law is being completely punted to the side. They're kicking it right into Kowloon Bay, and they are going to set up a Beijing-style secret police right there in Hong Kong.
I got to tell you, Jack, we only got your phone. Jack, Maxie, hang for a second. Back on Pacific just for a few minutes before we got him. Jack, the President of the United States came into the Rose Garden in late May and talked about, hey, this move on Hong Kong is absolutely unacceptable, and we're going to come out with a number of action steps that have to be taken. How severe do you think the president needs to be? I mean, we've advocated complete sanctions on individuals, on financial institutions, on cutting off access to the U.S. dollar. In your perspective, since you're a former naval intelligence officer that focused on the CCP, what do you think the president of the United States, what actions does he have to have regarding Hong Kong?
Well, it's an interesting situation because, of course, geography is destiny in many of these cases. Hong Kong, situated where it is at the head of the Pearl River Delta, they're in the mouth of the dragon. You cannot separate it from the Chinese mainland. It is essentially, it is physically there, and of course, since 1997, it has fallen under their sovereignty. That being said, the fulcrum on which all of the CCP's power rests is its economic relationship with the United States and a little bit of its burgeoning economic relationship with the rest of the world, but it really is that relationship with the United States. We finance them, we fund them, we buy their products, we put their money in their coffers. Once you go after that, once you start making them feel the pain at the highest levels in terms of that, sanctions are a good step, the currency, fighting the devaluation is a very good step, but anything that you can do to them economically is going to be what they really pay attention to, because everything else, whether you talk about statements or whether you talk about language or anything at the UN, it's just not going to have the same kind of effect on their bottom line as economic pressure is going to.
Jack, Maxie, go ahead and jump in there. You had a question for Pasovic?
No, I was just going to say one of the really frightening things that same security officer said this morning in Hong Kong. He said, our mission is already working. He said, a week ago you asked people and they said they were proud to support the students. Now everybody tells me this is a dangerous thing to do and that independence is a dangerous idea. So already on the street, you're actually seeing the people change their behavior. Also, the announcement is kind of frightening. I guess this will be kind of illustrated for our listeners. They announced that all the universities and schools in Hong Kong have to go through all of their libraries and remove any books that might be deemed negative for the Communist Party of China. So they're purging their libraries as we speak so as to be able to meet this law. It's very frightening. And also, I want to say I spent a lot of time with Elmer Luen, and he said there's an interpretation of this law currently that means that it applies to anybody, that it's not just to Chinese citizens. Anybody who is critical of the CCP who finds themselves in mainland China could be potentially arrested. The Taiwanese are warning all of their citizens about the danger of traveling to mainland China, and particularly Hong Kong. So this is a developing story, but it could have far-reaching ramifications around the world if they decide to apply it.
I think there was a professor or somebody on the internet that was saying this actually, they interpreted this could go to Boris Johnson, Mike Pompeo, and the President of the United States, that if they continued their anti-CCP rhetoric, that they would fall in this law. And obviously that's far-fetched. But so before we let you go, given your naval officer background, we got two carrier battle groups between Taiwan and China right now, steaming in the Straits of Taiwan. The Global Times, the tabloid arm of the information war of the CCP, has been saying, hey, we see your battle groups, so we got missiles that can take you out in one shot. Yeah.
Steve, unfortunately, we're just not going to make it in. We've got about 30 seconds left to go here.
Okay, fine. I'll answer the question then for Pasovic when we come back. Hashtag war room pandemic.
Thank you to Jack Pasovic for joining us here, Steve Cortez, and everything in the live chat on the hashtag War Room Pandemic. Make sure that you're part of the conversation. Go to pandemic.warroom.org. Make sure you're signed up to the newsletter. Make sure you're leaving a review, subscribing to the podcast. We'll be back in just a moment. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon. Don't go anywhere.
If you suffer from foot pain, ankle pain, knee pain, hip pain, even lower back pain, if just standing causes aches, soreness, and fatigue, the problem could be your feet. When your feet are out of alignment, your entire body is out of alignment and you're in pain. Now you can change all of that today. Introducing Superthotics, the doctor-designed breakthrough that solves the problem in your feet and relieves the pain throughout your entire body. It begins with the cushioned BioLock heel cup that holds your heel and ankle in perfect alignment. Now